Thank you. Thank you for the spirit and energy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for showing up. Like I mentioned many times in the past, we have a wonderful guest speaker here, multiple roles. He is a UW Eau Claire alumni, graduated. You will tell them when many years ago, 1970s, I believe, but still look very young. An author of a book, you know the title of the book, and also he's a very good storyteller and a very generous donor to our college too. Because you know you know a little bit about him. I will just, to save time, just turn it to you and introduce yourself a little bit and start telling us your experience and knowledge.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, everybody, for showing up on a beautiful day like today. I know you probably rather be someplace else. So, first thing, Shelley, I'd like to introduce my lovely wife, Shelley, also a UW Eau Claire alumna from 1976. We met in classroom 317, right across the hallway. So Shelley and I and our son John, who's also a graduate of Eau Claire with a marketing major in 2006, we love Eau Claire. We love UW Eau Claire, in my case, for three reasons. First, they gave me a scholarship. I'm originally from Greece. Without the scholarship, I wouldn't be able to study here. That's number one. Number two, I met my wife in this building, so we consider this building Holy Land. We like to come at least once a year and pay our respects to UW Eau Claire. And then the third reason, UW Eau Claire, I believe I got a first-class education. And I know I got a first-class education because when I graduated, I worked for two large American corporations in the computer industry and the communications industry. In the computer business was Burroughs Corporation, which is now called Unisys. And at that time, the #1 computer company in the world was a company called IBM. Have any of you heard of IBM? Okay. Burroughs was #2. And as an Eau Claire graduate, I was able to compete with IBM with no problems. And they had people from Harvard and whatever, you know. And then when I started my own business in 1989, based on a school paper I did here, and you'll learn more about that, I started competing on an international level. Our business now is 35 years old. Our son John, our second son John, owns and runs it. We have clients in 30 countries. And to compete on an international level, you have to be able to compete with anybody around the world. Most of our competitors are not even in the US. They're in probably Europe, most of them. So you guys are lucky to be at UW Eau Claire. How many of you are graduating pretty soon here? Yes, yes, no? Okay, quite a few, most of you. How many of you have jobs? Not as many. Okay. All right, guys, you're in luck because I'm going to share with you my most unconventional theory about jobs, okay? In my view, there's only 4 kinds of jobs in the world. How many people can believe this? You believe there's only 4 kinds of jobs in the world? Let me tell you what they are. #1, no job. You know what that is? Okay. #2, any job. Do you know what that is? Heck, you gotta pay your bills, right? So if you can't get a good job, you go for any job. There's nothing wrong with any job. Many people at any given time in their life had any job. #3, the right job. You guys know what the right job is? The right job is one that meets your skills and interests. And it could lead into the ultimate job, which I call the perfect job. So what do you think of that? How difficult do you think it is to get the perfect job? You know what the perfect job is? Perfect job is the one you would do it for no money. You'd love it so much that you say, hey, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. There's one problem with the perfect job. You can't get it unless you know what that perfect job is. How many of you know what your perfect job would be? Anybody? You know your perfect job? Wonderful. What is it?
CEO of a private golf course.
Wonderful. It helps to know what your perfect job is because you can work toward it. And sometimes, in order to get the perfect job, you have to create it yourself. When I graduated from Eau Claire, I got what I consider was the right job. I was in sales for 10 years, 11 years, and then I got the perfect job because I created it myself, which is starting my own company. So keep that in mind. You should keep in mind, what am I doing? Am I in no job, any job, right job, or perfect job? Hopefully that will help you. But that's not why I'm here, right? So, with that in mind, by the way, I didn't have a slide presentation because I don't believe in slide presentations. I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories. Hopefully, my stories are unconventional. I wanted to tell you the job story because that's an unconventional view of jobs, right? Has any of you heard this kind of thing before about 4 jobs? Okay. I'm going to share with you a lot of unconventional things. Hopefully, that will be good, but my approach is keep what you like, ignore the rest. So you don't feel like you have to follow all my ideas. So, enough about that. When your professor asked me to speak about cross-cultural leadership, I must admit I was a little perplexed. Marketing is my main interest, my profession, and I thought, man, what can I tell these people about cross-cultural leadership? And I thought culture is a very difficult concept. It's a big concept, right? But it permeates our whole lives. And I don't think I can talk about culture in general. I'm going to tell you some stories, and hopefully that'll give you a different perspective about cross-cultural understanding. How does that sound? Okay. So, at this point, I've already asked you about your plans and your graduation status and things, so I'm going to ask you a different kind of question. I'd like to ask you, you've had this class for a whole semester, right? The semester has a month left now. So, could you please answer this question for me in one word? Cross-cultural leadership is about blank. So, I don't know if I can write on this. Maybe I don't have to. So, what can I see some hands here? What would you think that word is? Cross-cultural leadership is about what? After 3 months of classes. Anybody has an idea? How would you define cross-cultural leadership in one word?
Like diversity?
Diversity is a good word. Cross-cultural leadership is about diversity. Thank you. Anybody else has an idea? I'll give you one. How about communication? Cross-cultural is about communication, right? Anybody else has an idea? Yes?
Patience.
Patience, that's a good one. Patience. Anybody else?
Relationships.
Relationships, excellent, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we have diversity, relationships. Help me here, what else? I forgot. What was patience? There was one more. I said communication. Of these words, which one do you think represents cross-cultural leadership the most? Anybody has an idea? You want to agree on one, so as a group we can have just one? Anyone? All right, we'll go with all of them. Would you, Shelley, would you keep track of them, please? Okay. Let me give you a little more information about me so you guys know how this Greek guy ended up in Eau Claire. My official Greek name is Evangelos. Ben is the nickname I got when I was 13 from my English teacher. Evangelos happens to mean, in Greek, means good messenger. So I'm gonna let you guys decide if my message today is gonna be good to you or not, okay? So with that in mind, let me tell you how I ended up in Eau Claire. When I was 14, 15 years old in Greece, in the city of Larissa, which is now the 5th largest city in Greece. Larissa has 250,000 people now. Greece has a population of about 11 million now. I found out that I could apply to become a foreign exchange student in high school. How many of you had foreign exchange students in your high school? Almost all of you. Okay, wonderful. Did you get to meet some of them? Okay. Well, here I am in Greece. My father is a construction worker. Both my parents had 6th grade education, poor family. But I was kind of unconventional thinker. When I found out I could go to America for a year, I jumped on this opportunity. I said, gee, I'm gonna go to America, improve my English. America was famous. I used to like Westerns when I was a younger boy. I thought, I'm gonna go to America for a year. And then I applied. There were 32 students in my city that applied. 4 of us made it. And I ended up in Barron, Wisconsin. You have no choice where you go. You guys know where Barron, Wisconsin is? It's 50 miles north of here. At that time, the population was 3,000, now it's 4. And I ended up with a wonderful host family that lived on a farm 3 miles out of town. And when I heard I was going on to a farm, I thought, oh, wonderful, because I had seen all these Westerns. I pictured myself as a cowboy going on a cattle drive. You know what I'm talking about? You've seen Westerns, right? Well, I ended up being on a farm with 25 big cows. And one of my jobs was to get the cows from the fields to go to the milk house. And they were moving very slowly and generating dust. And I thought, okay, this is not as glamorous as driving a cattle drive in a Western, but I was happy to be there because I was in America, right? And in my book, I have 5 stories about my year in Barron, Wisconsin. And when my book was out, and by the way, I'm not here to promote my book. I've already arranged it so any of you can get a free copy of the book. And the book will be also, I donated books to the library, so any of you can read my book in the library, okay? Maybe next semester, because now you're busy with probably exams. Okay, so the local newspaper in Barron interviewed me, and he said, do you realize, he said, that 20% of your book is about your 1 year in Barron, Wisconsin? Imagine that. I wrote the book when I was 65 years old. I'm gonna be 70 this October, and 20% of my book is about my 1 year in Barron. Why do you think that is? Because that changed my life. That year made it possible for me to come to Eau Claire. When I went back to Greece, I applied to be accepted at a Greek university, and I failed. I didn't make it. That failure is the beginning of my success in the rest of my life, because I did not pass the Greek entrance exam to a Greek university. I said, I'm not gonna even try. I'm gonna apply at UW Eau Claire, because I knew UW Eau Claire when I was in Barron, right? And UW Eau Claire gave me a scholarship. So that changed my life. And that's why we love Eau Claire, right? But UW Eau Claire also, when I was getting my MBA, I had to do an independent study project, and I did a project involving 9 counties in western Wisconsin about export marketing. And that gave me the idea to start my own international trade company. I gave the professor a copy of my study. I wrote a report of, I think it was 67 pages, and it was published in a magazine at that time. It was published in Milwaukee, I think, or Madison, called Wisconsin business. And if you want to read my paper, the professor has it. So, okay. Do you guys know enough about me now? Okay, now it's time for a break. I'm going to read you a story that relates a lot to what you've been learning about. This is about a survey that the United Nations did some time ago. The UN sent a survey to all the countries in the world asking this one question. The question was, would you please give your honest opinion about solutions to the food shortage in the rest of the world? It's a very good question, right? How many of you have heard of food shortages around the world? It's a good cause. So, here's what some of the answers were. Countries from Africa responded and they said they didn't know what food meant. In Eastern Europe, some countries said, what does honest mean? In Western Europe, most countries said, we don't know what shortage means. In China, some people said, what does opinion mean? In the Middle East countries, some said, what is a solution? What does solution mean? And in South America, most didn't know what please means. And in the USA, reported that most people didn't know what the rest of the world means. What do you think of this? Do you think it's funny? Do you think it's serious? Anybody has an idea? What does that tell us about cross-cultural understanding today? You can't even assume the meaning of the word food, or the word shortage, or honest, or opinion, or solution. So we got a serious problem with the sake of communication. So keep that in mind as we move on to a couple other stories here. So I'm gonna switch gears here. I got my card all mixed up. Okay, we did that. And did that. So let's move on. To this question here. I'm going to tell you 4 country stories. I'm going to tell you a story about America. I'm going to tell you a story about Turkey, one about Japan, and about China. And I've been to all those countries. Obviously, in the US, I spent my entire life. So, when I came in 1971, AFS had a plan at that time. They thought, okay, we're bringing in all these students from around the world. We need to teach them something about American culture. Does that sound reasonable? By the way, at any given time, if I say something that you guys don't agree or you think it's kind of totally out of bounds, just raise your hand, okay? You don't need to wait. So, we had what I thought was a very interesting experience. That year, 3,000 students came from around the world. That they had 1,500 of us come through New York and spend 1 week of orientation in Long Island. And the other 1,500 came from the western part of the world, and they were gathered in San Francisco, but the orientation was basically the same. So we had a week on this beautiful campus that kind of reminds me of UW Eau Claire, although UW Eau Claire is better. And I thought, oh man, someday I hope I end up on a beautiful campus like this, and my wish came true. But while I was there for a week, one day we had a class about subjects like religion in America, or politics in America, or how you're gonna try to do your best in your high school in America, and things like that, which are all reasonable, right? And one day, we had usually a presenter, and then we had discussions afterwards. one of the topics one day was how to deal with questions you're going to be asked about what you see in America. And they gave us some examples. They said, you know, you're going to be with your host family and you're going to be showing you different places, and they're going to ask for your opinion. You're going to see different buildings, different parks, and so on. And they said, you have to be a little careful not to always tell them exactly what you think. You have to make it sound nicer. Like, for example, they said, you know, if you think a building is ugly, don't say it's ugly. You say, oh, it's different. You know, that's interesting. Have you heard those expressions before? How would you react if someone told you to say, hey, don't tell them what you think, just tell them something nice? Anybody wants to volunteer? What would your reaction be? Okay. I'll tell you what my reaction was. And many of the other students. We thought, gee, that's weird, because we thought everybody in America is a liar. You never know what they're saying, right? And if everybody knows that they're lying, why don't you just, if you know that interesting and different means ugly, why don't you just say it's ugly? And we started making fun of Americans. So, I thought about this a lot, because after I went to my family, I discussed this. That I thought, that made the most impression. I was in that college for a week. I remember two things. This is the one thing, and the other thing I remember the beautiful Iceland girls. But you have to read my book to find out about the beautiful Iceland girls. And Shelley loves that story. Okay, so after I thought about it, in the book, I put that story in the book, and I called the chapter Orientation to Kindness. What do you think of that title? Orientation to Kindness. Where you don't really necessarily tell the people what you think, but you take the person's feelings into consideration, right? So maybe international culture communication has something to do with kindness too, right? We have to be sensitive, perhaps, of the other person's feelings. Okay, that was my story about America. Now I'm going to move to Turkey. In 1991, it was the third year of my business, and we had started, by the way, you guys have to imagine a world of no internet and no email. Can you do that? Do you know what a fax machine is? You know what a fax machine is? Okay, everything was working via fax, and at that time it cost $1 to send one page via fax. And I was sending 50 faxes a day, so that can add up, right? Well, I had communicated with several companies in Turkey, and I thought maybe it's worth going to Turkey to establish some clients. Well, there's a problem about Turkey and Greece. Do you know that these are enemies for 1,000 years? You know, Greece and Turkey have been fighting going back to 1453, when Turkey took over the Ottoman Empire, took over Greece and Constantinople, which is now called Istanbul. So Istanbul is the commercial capital of Turkey, although Ankara is actually the capital of Turkey. So I told my parents in Greece and my friends in Greece, well, I was thinking of going to Turkey, and everybody said, what, are you crazy? The Turks hate the Greeks, don't go there. You know, they may kill you, they may kidnap you, just don't go to Turkey. Well, I thought long and hard, and I thought, okay, what are they gonna do? You know, I have a Greek name, I look Greek. I'm not gonna listen to them. I'm gonna go to Turkey, and if they kill me, they kill me. Well, it's gonna happen, you know. So I booked my trip to Turkey. I go to Istanbul. I stayed in a very nice, expensive hotel. I wanted to be in the safe section of the city. I already had made a couple of appointments with people I had communicated, and on my way to the first client, very first client, Monday morning, I take the taxi from the hotel, and I'm gonna visit this company, and the taxi guy, I gave the taxi driver the address, and he took me to a place, and he didn't speak English, but he made me understand he couldn't go any further because it was a one-way street. And I saw the sign, I said, no problem. So I had to walk about 200 yards. And as I was walking, I could hear people, my left and right, talking to each other, and every third, fourth word would be Ben. And I thought, oh man, they're talking about me. And I imagined them saying, oh, don't look now, but that's Ben, the Greek, he's here for business, let's get him next corner, you know. But I thought, if you start thinking that you're in a foreign country, you never know, you hear Ben, Ben, Ben. So I go to my prospective client's office, and I meet Omer Askar, who's 10 years older than me or so. And we started talking, and the first thing I asked him, Omer, please tell me what the word Ben means. Because he says, why? I said, well, I was walking on the street, and so often I would hear everybody talk Ben, Ben, Ben. And he started laughing. He says, no, don't worry about it. You know what Ben means in Turkish? He says, it's the word I. They were talking about themselves. I did this, I did that. So they weren't talking about me. And it kind of was a lesson for me, because Omer tells me that, he says, Ben, I'm so happy you're here, because he says, before I started my business, I was in the Turkish Navy, and I had to go to San Francisco for 6-month training, and my best friend there was a Greek guy from the Greek Navy, and we got along so well that he says, we're still in touch. And all my friends and my parents says, don't go to Turkey, they're gonna kill you, right? And Omer tells me, I'm glad you're here, because I've already have a Greek friend. Well, to make a long story short, Omer's company is now, we've been working together for 35 years. Omer is retired, we're still very good friends. And Omer's son, Michael, is running the business. And our son, John, is running our business. And they still continue to work together. And I figured if I hadn't gone to Turkey over the last 35 years, we would have missed in business at least $10 million. So what does that tell you about preconceived notions about other cultures? I'll let you guys think about that. One of the questions that comes up in international trade is something that is in very short supply. And what that is trust. The question is, how do you build trust with people from a different culture? Well, I'll tell you what worked for me. I started visiting people in different countries, and there's nothing like face-to-face communication, to look at someone in the eye, and then to tell your story. I made a point of always telling them how I ended up in America, that I was an immigrant to America. And they knew exactly who I was, and they could relate to my story. Another thing that I did, which was a little different then, I always brought my camera with me, and I took pictures of me and the client together, and then I would send them the pictures. Now everybody has, of course, a portable phone, so you can, and one of the other things that happened on my very first trip to Turkey, my second meeting, because I met the people face to face and we spent some time together, they gave us an order for $50,000. They had to pay us in advance. They sent us $50,000 in advance. And they said, we're buying these products, we want you to keep it there, and then as we have clients, you will be sending the products to different people. You know, $50,000 30 years ago was a lot of money, right? How much can you trust the internet these days and send $50,000 across the ocean and hope to get your product? Unless you met them in person and they trust you, right? So trust becomes very important, right? And it's gonna become even more important with AI. So that's something to consider. How are we doing, Shelley, with time? I have to hurry up here. Okay, I'm gonna talk about something else now, and this is my story about Japan. When I went to Japan, I had met via faxes this couple. They were young people, around 30. They wanted to start importing some of the products that we were handling. And they weren't sure how to do it, and they told me that there was a trade show. Everybody knows what a trade show is? Okay, if you guys start working in the business world, you need to go to trade shows because that's an education in itself. Because everybody in the industry is there and you learn by just looking at their exhibits. So I go and visit with them. I went to Tokyo and then we took the train to Osaka, and we are at this trade show, and I'm with these young people walking the trade show, trying to see what products there were, trying to get some ideas. And as we're walking, I see the name of an exhibitor, Syros Corporation, S-Y-R-O-S. And right away it caught my eye because Syros, spelled exactly like that, is a Greek island. And I told my host, quote unquote, I said, hey, I'd like to talk to the guy at this stand because the name of his company is a Greek island. They said, okay. So we go over there and I start talking to the guy, who is Japanese, of course, but he speaks very good English. And I just had the curiosity. Remember my unconventional approach, right? I just wanted to satisfy my curiosity. Why the hell a Japanese company chooses a Greek island as the corporation name, right? And he says, oh yeah, I said, you know that this is a Greek island, Syros? Oh, he says, yes, I do, and I've been there. And he says, we do a lot of business with Greece. And he said, we are importing marble from Greece, and I have a good friend who is from Greece. And I met him at the University of Philadelphia when we were roommates. And I said, what city in Greece? He said, he's from Larissa. Larissa is my hometown. Okay, what's the probability that I, Greek evangelist from Larissa, goes to Japan for the first time, sees Syros Corporation, and he meets a Japanese company who he had a Greek roommate from Larissa? Very low probability, right? Well, one of the things that you guys will find out someday, it's difficult to work with the Japanese because they don't trust you until you work with them for 10 years, right? That's their culture. But if they trust you and they start working with you, they'll work with you for the rest of your life. I didn't do that because I knew that these guys didn't trust anybody, but I did it just to satisfy my curiosity. And we exchanged cards with the guy, and I said, by the way, if you need any products from the US, let us know and maybe we can help you. To make a long story short, that corporation, Syros Corporation, became a very good client for the next probably 10 years, and they were buying from us, listen to this, they were buying from us two products. They were buying Casio watches, which are made in Japan. And the reason they were buying from us Casio watches made in Japan is because at that time, Casio had made a series of watches that were specific for the American market, and they became very popular in Japan, but you couldn't get them in Japan. And we sold them thousands of Casio watches, and then we also sold them Zippo lighters. I don't know if you guys have heard of Zippo lighters. So, because I had the curiosity to say, why Syros Corporation? Over the next 10 years, we literally did over $1 million worth of business. And we made probably a couple $100,000 profit. And that reminds me of another story that involves horses. Have you guys noticed horses that are in big cities, they wear blinders? Okay, I looked this up and I found out that horses have literally 360 degrees peripheral vision. Humans have about 180 degrees peripheral vision. And of course, the reason they put the blinders in the cities to horses so they don't want them to be scared from traffic and so on. So the question is, I just came up with this concept that in addition to the vision, peripheral vision, I think there's a mind's peripheral vision. Some people are going through life with a very narrow mind of what work is or what business is about. So the question is, what is your mind's peripheral vision? Is it like a horse with blinders, or is it at least 180 degrees? So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, let me see. How am I doing for time, Shelley?
Well, 5 to 10.
Okay. I got all my texts and stuff now. Okay, I'm gonna tell you my Chinese story completely. Next. My Chinese story is, I went to China also because we had some prospects, and I went to a trade show. I went to Beijing, and we had an intern student that was getting his master's in Minneapolis at the St. Thomas University. And then when he went back to Japan, he says, if you ever come to China, please look me up. And then he says, I'll be your guide, which is wonderful because, you know, you go to China, you gotta have someone. And one of the days, we didn't visit any clients or anything. I just wanted to see the Great Wall of China. And we went to a place that's an hour and a half away because my friend has a friend, we had a car and we went out there. And on top of the Great Wall of China, which is, by the way, an amazing sight to see, there's a lady that is in the mid-30s or so, and she's wearing a warrior suit, like the Chinese traditional warrior suit, and she's there selling photos of herself with visitors. And I'm there with my friends, and as I looking at her, I see that we had a physical resemblance. She kind of reminded me of my mother. She had cheeks like I do, kind of big cheeks. And then I thought, I'll joke with her, although she didn't speak English, but my friend was translating. I said, hey, you look like my lost sisters. We are related. Look, we look the same. And she paid attention to my looks, and yeah, she said, you lost my brother. You know, and we started communicating with her basic English and me, my friends translating. And for the next 10, 15 minutes, we were just joking about being brother and sister, lost. And it was the most wonderful experience I had in a foreign country, not because I was getting any possibility for business or orders or anything. It was just a connection on a personal level. Oh, she was young lady in the 30s, and I was, I think, 45 or 46, whatever. And when I look back, you know, and talk about my experience, I spoke with your professor about China because obviously he's from China, and I also went to the city of Shanghai, which I thought was the most impressive city in the world, and that was 20 years ago. And my pleasant memory of China is me talking to this young lady, joking about how she was my lost sister and I was her lost brother. Because when we talk about cross-cultural leadership, it's also about humans connecting on a personal level. And I think sometimes we miss those opportunities if we're not looking at the human aspect of this communication of relationship. And with that, how much time, Shelley? 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. I wanna close with a quote. I told you about Turkey, Japan, and China, right? So let's review now the sentence about cross-cultural leadership. What other words would you add to that list we talked about? How about human connection? Right? On one-to-one. How about trust? How about just looking at people just as people and say cross-cultural leadership is about people with all the, because after all, you know, they can speak a foreign language, right? They can look different, but they're just like you and me. You know, they have the same needs, the same goals for themselves and their families. They want a better life. And if we start looking at cross-cultural communication and leadership, it's just being yourself and dealing with people the same way you would like to be treated. That's what has worked for me. And it becomes a real pleasure to be able to have friends, real friends around the world. So that's something to consider. And I wanted to share with you the definition I saw recently about the word leadership that I like. And this comes from Sheryl Sandberg, who was the chief operating officer for Facebook and Meta. I don't know if you probably heard of Sheryl Sandberg. Now she left and she's doing other things. But she said, leadership is about making others better and making sure that that lasts. In other words, having an influence on other people's lives. And it should be an important difference, not just something buying someone a coffee, you know, helping them make their life better. And while we're at that, how about trying to make the whole world better? And maybe the planet too. That's leadership as well. So, how do we do that? Well, how I see it is that if we're open-minded, if we're aware and sensitive of the other people's cultures, if we treat people with dignity and respect, and then if we have continuous learning too. And I'm gonna close with a quote by someone you have heard of perhaps. How many of you remember Arthur C. Clarke? Does the name ring a bell? Do you guys, have you heard of the movie Space Odyssey 2001? Okay, well, Arthur Clarke is before you died, yeah. I think Space Odyssey 2001, it came in 1980 or something, long before your parents were born. So, this guy is dead now, but I want to share this quote with you because I think it's a very meaningful one, at least for me. He said, "In my life, I have found two things of priceless worth: learning and loving." He says, not fame, not power, not achievement can possibly have the same lasting value. Because, he says, when your life is over, if you can say, I have learned and I have loved, you will also be able to say, I have been happy. So I wish you a lot of learning and a lot of happiness. Thank you very much. Okay, now, questions. We accept and are thankful for compliments too. Did anything of what I said make sense to you? Did you guys learn something that you didn't learn in your books so far? Because one of my goals today was not to tell you anything you've already read in your books. So I always jump on the opportunity to be in Eau Claire, as I told you before, because we love Eau Claire. But I also can see myself in your shoes. You know, we had guest speakers when I was a student here, and you always wonder, you know, and I want to make sure you guys got your money's worth. You know the joke, they say, you didn't have to pay anything because that's what it was worth, right? It was a free presentation, but I appreciate this time. I'm surprised you guys don't have any questions. Go ahead.
I was just wondering what drew you to Eau Claire. Like, I know you went when you were younger, but what drew you?
Well, it's funny that I actually applied at Stout too. I applied at Stout at UW Eau Claire. And I would have been probably just as happy to have gone to Stout, to tell you the truth, because I didn't know much of the universities. Other than I had seen the campus. Here's a funny story. When I was in Barron, I came to Eau Claire with a family for one day, and the vision that I have of the campus was, you guys know the bridge that is not the path, the walking bridge, but just down, is it State Street, or what street is that with the bridge there?
Yeah, State Street.
Okay, I was driving on that, and I got a glimpse of the upper campus and the towers, right? And because I stayed in the towers for 2 years. And then 3 years later, I was in a room in towers, and I was facing this way. I could see that bridge. And when I came and I went to my window and I saw that bridge, it was like making a circle. But going back to your question, I came to Eau Claire because they accepted me. I didn't know much about Eau Claire. And I was very much involved in my book. I have one of my favorite stories in the book is one called Educated at the University Library. One of the things that I did, and you guys now you have everything in line. At that time, the University Library in Eau Claire had a room called the browsing room. And it was a wonderful room because when I discovered it in my second semester, I think, it wasn't big, it was about this, as big as this room, but they had probably 15 newspapers. Every day they changed, or in some cases weekly. They had every magazine you can imagine, and then they had some books too. And I thought, oh my God, this is the place to be. And especially in the winter months, I was there. I also got a job at the university bookstore, so all my friends knew, Ben, is either going to be at the university bookstore or at the browsing room, because I loved that place so much. And I owe my success in life, this sounds a little exaggeration, at the time I spent at the library browsing room, not reading textbooks, reading newspapers and magazines. And what that, for example, they had the British magazine, what is the
Economist?
The Economist, thank you, Shelby. The Economist. You guys heard of the magazine, The Economist? It's the only magazine in the world, at least back then, that was doing stories about every country in the world. Most of the American magazines tend to be so focused on America. And I thought this joke about, the Americans said, what does the rest of the world mean, right? Well, America is 330 million. What's the world population now? Anybody knows? 8.5 billion, right? There's a whole world out there, folks, other than the 300 million of America. Yes, America is the biggest economy still, right? 30 years ago, America's economy used to be 30% of the world economy. You know what it is now? Anybody wants to guess? Close to 20%. And it's going down every year. Which tells me that my grandchildren, we have 3 grandchildren, and your children, grandchildren, are gonna have to work a lot more with the rest of the world. We are no longer the king of the hill, China, they were saying China was gonna be the greatest economy in the world maybe in another 20 years. My prediction is China is gonna be the largest economy in the world by 2030. That's just 6 years away. What do you think, Professor?
Oh, I thought this already is.
There,
I'm
man.
biased.
Yeah, from your perspective, yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't looked at
Depends how you
it.
calculate it.
Yeah. Okay. There. India is coming up. India has India has more than, 1.2 billion, I think, population. So India is gonna be a bigger, Brazil is coming up, Indonesia has 400 million people. So it's reality. You have to be prepared in living in a world that the US is no longer the king of the hill. So, okay, any other questions or comments? Yes?
Yeah, how many other countries have you been to, and do any other like examples stick out to you?
Yes, good question. I've been to 30 countries so far, and my favorites in Europe are Italy, and I have a section in the book. It's wonderful to see the differences. The further north you go in Europe, the less hospitable they are. I don't know why it is, but in other words, you are there, you came from America to visit them, they just assume they're gonna see you for half an hour, and then the rest of the time, you're on your own. And you just accept that. I say, of all the Europeans, the people, and I have good friends in the Netherlands, they have the worst social graces in the world. No hospitality, zero. And then you go to Italy and Spain and Greece and Turkey, they want to pick you up at the airport, help you find a hotel, they'll pay for your hotel, they'll take you out to dinner 5 times, they will pay for it. Our friends and clients in Italy, they send a driver, it took us from their town to Milan airport, 2 hours away. They took care of that. It's just amazing. And Italy, of course, has the best food too, and beautiful scenery. We like Norway, although we didn't do much business in Norway, but we spent a couple weeks in Norway. So if you guys want to see a beautiful country, go to Norway, or Italy, or Greece. Greece is beautiful. We got lucky in a way, because, I didn't know it at the time, our business, I'm surprised nobody asked me about what our business does. Are you curious to know what we do? We are a trading company, which means we sell products, and the product that we ended up selling the most, and we made that our big business, is electronic equipment for ships. Our company now is called WTN Electronics, and our website is WTNLTD.com, which our son has now. And we only work with commercial ships, that's big ships, tankers and so on, and we sell equipment that goes into the bridge. We don't make any equipment, we don't install equipment, we don't service equipment. They come to us and they say, we want product X and we need it on the port of Singapore on date Y. And then we give them a price and we say, yes, we can do that. And most clients pay us in advance, except the clients we know in Greece that have been clients for 30 years or more, 35 years. And Greece happens to be the largest ship owning company in the world. They own, in terms of tonnage, they own 18% of the world's ships, and most of them are tankers. And most of the companies are family-owned businesses, so some of these families, they're not listed on the stock market. Some of them own as many as 50, 60, 80 tankers. And it just so happens, by accident, we got into that business, and it's been a very good business for us. So, what was your question? What have been other countries? Yeah, we like Australia and New Zealand. All countries have something to offer. Now our son John, who's started to travel, and he's been already to 20 countries, and he went to Vietnam, where we have a couple good clients, and he thought Vietnam was wonderful. And one of our best clients now is in Saudi Arabia. He's been to Saudi Arabia a couple times, and he said, this company that has been our client for probably 20 years, they have about, 20, 30 women working there, but they have them in a separate room. And John was taken over there, and he could wave at them from the door. They wouldn't even allow him to enter the room with the women, which is fine, that's Saudi Arabia, and you accept that as the reality. But you learn something from every culture. There's not one perfect culture. Like there's not one perfect human being. We're a little different. Everybody has their idiosyncrasies, you know. Okay, any other questions? I think we have at least another 5 minutes. No, yes?
So what inspired you to be a writer?
Good question. You know, I say English is still a foreign language to me, but I've been struggling for it for 50 years. And when I retired 8 years ago, I wanted to write my family stories for our 2 sons and our grandchildren. And I realized that when I started to write the stories, I didn't know how to write a book, right? You have to, there's like everything else, there's a technique, you need to know how to do it, right? And then when I realized I didn't know how, I started taking classes. There's a place in Minneapolis called The Loft that offers writing classes. And then I started reading memoirs, and I joined a writers group called the Minneapolis Writers Workshop. And I say it took me 2 years to learn how to write a book, because it's not easy. I'll give you an example. When I started writing my first chapter, you found out that I met Shelley in Eau Claire, we got married, and then after that, there's no suspense, you know, the story is done. Now, because you already know this, I'll tell you, you find out my first chapter is, the whole chapter mostly is how I met Shelley at classroom 317 and how I ran after her when the class was over to get her phone number. And I caught up with her at the lobby of Schneider Hall. How many books do you guys know about Schneider Hall? My book, my first chapter is all about Schneider Hall. Okay, and then I got Shelley's number. You don't find out that we were married until like page 175 or something. Because you have to, and I have 27 stories, and I have stories about my grandparents, but all the stories have a common thread, and the thread is the evolution of my thinking. And although you find out in chapter 1 that I promised my parents I would not marry an American, I ended up marrying an American, and gladly. So the question becomes, how does the guy that promises his parents not to marry an American marries an American? Well, you also find that I was an unconventional thinker since I was in 2nd grade, since I was 8 years old. And so you see the evolution of my thinking, that when the time, and I considered that by way that decision to marry Shelley, an American, was the most important decision I made. And I'm so proud of the book because I spent a lot of time on it. So it was an interesting, and I would encourage it. And I'm thinking now of writing a couple other books because I have some ideas. And maybe I'll write a book about the 4 jobs. What do you think? Will there be an interest in my idea of the 4 different jobs? Okay, any other questions? Okay, the time is up. So, thank you. You've been a very good audience. I really appreciate your attention. So,
Thank you so much. Thank you. I would add two more things. The first one is just to answer your question. I didn't have a chance to answer your question. Cross-cultural leadership is blank. I can tell from your story, and the one word I would like to add is courage. So from your story, I can see when you have the chance, especially related to international career, for example, a chance to go to a different country. A country may be very scary to you, Turkey, and try to say yes. I know it's scary, I know it's hard, I know it's uncomfortable, but once you are there, you see people just like people. And one thing I also already shared with you, everyone in this classroom is working in a project called X Culture Project. They're working with students from different countries. And we have a joke in X Culture community. We ask, what does X stand for? We say X stands for X-ray. So we see people through X-ray. If you see a full body X-ray picture, they don't know, you cannot tell where that person comes from. So it's just look through the surface. We look different, but deep down we are all the same.
yeah.
And second one is just to the students. I read the book. Thank you so much. And then one thing I would say, I would highly recommend you guys when you have time to read the book. And we will have copies in library very soon.
Yes.
If you have Apple and iPhone, it is free on Apple Book. And the reason is, after reading your book, I think everyone in this classroom can relate to his story. I'm an immigrant. I can read your story. And your book, of course, you see a walking advertisement of how Google can be successful in international world. And also, like, just, I'm going to borrow your quote from the CEO of Meta at Facebook. A good story, a good leadership, a good book will empower you, and any empowerment will last. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. And if I'm invited, I'll be gladly back here to talk about something else. Marketing is my thing, by the way, so I'm hoping that I'll be talking about international marketing also. All right, thank you, everybody.